Hey there, fellow deep divers. Ready to explore some more big ideas with us?
Always.
Awesome. Well, today we're taking a deep dive into James Allen's The Mastery of Destiny.
Ah, a classic.
It is written all the way back in 1909, but still so relevant. I mean, did you ever feel like you're kind of stuck? Like things are just happening to you and you don't have much control?
Oh, all the time. I think that's a pretty universal feeling.
Right. And that's exactly what Allen tackles head on in this book. He's basically saying, hey, you can become the architect of your own life. Sounds pretty good, right?
It does. But I'm curious, how does he approach that? Is it all about like positive thinking and manifesting your dreams?
Well, he definitely touches on the power of thought. But what's interesting is that he combines this almost spiritual idea of self-mastery with a very practical, almost scientific approach.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just fluffy affirmations.
Not at all. He lays out a whole system for understanding how our minds work and how we can use that understanding to shape our reality. And one of the most mind-blowing ideas he presents is this concept of a time delay when it comes to cause and effect.
Time delay. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's not always instant karma, like you do something bad and immediately trip over a rock.
Right.
Sometimes the consequences of our actions, or even our thoughts, take a while to catch up to us.
I can see how that would be easy to miss. We might not connect the dots.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. Allen argues that what we often perceive as fate or bad luck might actually be the result of our own past choices coming back to us.
Whoa. So like we create our own fate in a way.
In a way, yeah. It's like we're planting seeds all the time, both good and bad, and eventually those seeds grow into the experiences we have.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this. It's like
Yeah.
we can't just blame everything on external circumstances. We have to take responsibility for the choices we've made, even the ones we made a long time ago.
Exactly. And that's why Allen stresses the importance of becoming a divine scientist of our own minds. He says we need to start paying close attention to our thoughts and actions, almost like we're conducting an experiment on ourselves.
So instead of just letting our minds run wild, we need to become more aware of what's going on in there.
Exactly. It's about becoming a curious observer of your own internal world, kind of like a scientist peering into a microscope.
I like that analogy, but how do we actually do that? Does he give us any concrete steps?
He does. Allen lays out 5 key steps to achieving self-mastery.
5 steps. Okay, I'm ready to take notes. What's the first one?
The first one is introspection.
Introspection.
It's about turning that mental spotlight inward and observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So not judging ourselves, just observing. Got it. What's next?
The next step is self-analysis. This is where we get honest with ourselves about what we've discovered.
Honest, huh?
Yep. Which thoughts and behaviors lead to feelings of peace and happiness, and which ones tend to drag us down.
So we're not just noticing our thoughts, but we're actually evaluating them. We're figuring out which ones are serving us and which ones are holding us back.
Exactly. We're figuring out what to keep and what to toss.
This is starting to sound a lot like some of the self-help stuff we see today.
It really is. Allen was way ahead of his time in many ways. And once we've identified those mental weeds that are causing us trouble,
The weeds. Love.
the next step is adjustment. This is where we start making conscious changes to align our thoughts and actions with the principles that lead to well-being.
Okay, so it sounds like this is where the rubber meets the road. It's not enough to just think about changing. We actually have to start doing things differently.
Right. Action is key.
But what about those times when we just can't seem to muster up the willpower to break a bad habit or follow through on a goal?
That's where Allen's insights on willpower come in. And this is where he really shines. He doesn't just offer vague advice like try harder. He gives us 7 very specific rules for training the will.
7 rules. Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. What's the first one?
The first rule, and arguably the most important one, is to break bad habits. He argues that every time we give in to a bad habit, we weaken our willpower. But every time we resist that urge, we strengthen it.
So it's like working out a muscle. The more we practice resisting temptation, the stronger our willpower becomes.
Exactly. It's all about building that mental strength.
Makes sense. I can definitely relate to that. There are times when I know I should be working on a project, but I end up scrolling through social media instead.
And that's exactly what Allen is talking about. He says we need to be vigilant in identifying those moments when we're about to give into a bad habit and consciously choose a different course of action.
Easier said than done, right?
It is, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with distractions and temptations.
Right. It's like a constant battle for our attention.
It is. But that's why Allen's second rule is so important. Once we've started to weed out those bad habits, We need to replace them with good ones.
Okay, that makes sense. Fill the void, so to speak.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more. So we were talking about swapping those bad habits out for some good ones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, okay, I've ditched the junk food. What healthy snack should I be reaching for instead? But like for our minds.
Exactly. And Alan is all about being intentional here. He says we need to really focus on the process of forming good habits, not just the outcome.
Hmm. Okay. I'm not sure I follow. What do you mean?
Well, let's say you want to write a novel. That's your goal.
Okay.
If you're just fixated on that outcome, like holding the finished book in your hands,
Yeah.
it can feel super overwhelming, especially when you're just starting out.
Yeah.
But if you shift your focus to the process,
The process.
yeah, like writing a certain number of words every day,
Oh, okay.
that becomes way more manageable, right?
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you're breaking down this huge, scary goal into smaller, bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. And each time you finish one of those little steps, you're reinforcing that good habit.
You're making it stick.
You got it. And that actually leads perfectly into Alan's third rule for building willpower.
Oh, lay it on me.
It's all about being present in the moment.
Wait, like mindfulness? That's so trendy these days.
It is. But Alan was talking about this over 100 years ago. He called it present moment focus. And he thought it was absolutely key for cultivating willpower and actually reaching your goals.
So, like, instead of letting our minds wander to the past or worry about the future, we need to bring our full attention to whatever we're doing right now.
Exactly. Whether it's doing the dishes, having a conversation, working on a project, the key is to be fully engaged right here, right now.
I've noticed that when I'm really absorbed in something, I totally lose track of time.
Happens to me all the time.
It's like I enter this flow state where everything else just fades away.
That's a perfect example of present moment focus in action. And Alan would argue that this state of deep concentration, that's essential for achieving mastery in any field.
It makes sense, yeah. If you're always letting your mind wander, you're never going to be able to fully dedicate yourself to anything.
Right, you're scattered.
But that's so hard to do, isn't it? Our minds are like, I don't know, wild monkeys sometimes, swinging from one thought to the next.
That's a great analogy. And it's true, our minds can be pretty unruly. But Alan believed that with practice and discipline, we can learn to tame those monkeys and harness the power of concentration.
So it's like training a muscle. The more we practice focusing our attention, the easier it gets.
You got it. It's a skill you can develop. And Alan actually outlined 4 distinct stages of concentration.
4 stages. Okay, now I'm really curious. Tell me more.
All right, so the first stage is what he calls attention. It's basically just the act of directing your mental focus towards something specific, like shining a spotlight.
Okay, so that's the foundation. If you can't even hold your attention on something for a few moments, you're not going to get very far.
Exactly. And once you've got that attention down, the next stage is contemplation. This is where you move beyond just noticing something to actually thinking about it, exploring it.
So it's like taking that spotlight and zooming in on the details, really examining what you're focused on.
Precisely. And this stage is so crucial for understanding ourselves and the world around us. It's through contemplation that we have those aha moments. We gain insights, we solve problems, we make wise decisions.
Oh, that's making me think about all those times I've rushed into a decision without really thinking things through.
Yeah,
Maybe I should have spent a little more time contemplating.
maybe. And speaking of deeper thinking, this brings us to the third stage. Alan calls this one abstraction. This is where things get pretty interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears. What is abstraction all about?
Well, it's a state of really deep mental absorption. The outside world fades away, and you become totally immersed in what you're focused on.
Wow, that sounds intense, like some kind of deep flow state.
Hmm.
Is this something everyone can achieve, or is it just for, like, geniuses and mystics?
Alan believed that anyone can reach this level of concentration when enough practice. He describes it as a state of activity in repose, where you're fully engaged but also completely at ease.
So it's not about forcing yourself to focus, but rather finding that sweet spot where effortlessness and concentration kind of merge together.
Exactly. And he uses this really cool analogy to explain this state. He compares it to a spinning top.
The spinning top.
Yeah. When a top is spinning at its maximum speed, it looks perfectly still, almost as if it's asleep.
Right.
But that stillness isn't because of inactivity. It's the product of perfectly balanced, intensely focused energy.
That's such a vivid image. It's like the eye of the storm where everything is calm and peaceful, even though there's this whirlwind of activity happening all around.
Precisely. And Allen believed this is the highest level of concentration, a state of effortless mastery where you can accomplish incredible things without strain or struggle.
Sounds pretty amazing. But even if we never reach that level of mastery, just understanding these stages can help us be more focused and productive in our daily lives.
Absolutely. If we can start to notice when our minds are wandering and gently bring them back to the task at hand, we're already making progress.
And remember, this is a process. It takes time and practice to develop those concentration muscles.
It does, but the more you work at it, the more you'll experience the benefits. And speaking of benefits, I'm curious to hear more about how all of this connects back to that big idea of mastering our destiny.
Right. We've talked about thoughts, actions, habits, concentration.
Mm-hmm.
But how do all these things actually help us shape the course of our lives?
That's the million-dollar question. And it brings us to one of Allen's most powerful insights, the power of purpose. He argues that a clear and unwavering purpose, it's like a compass that guides us through life's complexities.
So it's what gives our actions meaning and direction, helps us stay on track even when things get tough.
Precisely. Allen actually compares a life without purpose to a scattered army, weak and ineffective, but a life with purpose.
Yeah.
It's like a focused laser beam able to cut through any obstacle.
Whoa.
It makes me think of all those incredible people throughout history who accomplished amazing things despite facing huge challenges. People like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. They were all driven by this deep sense of purpose that fueled their actions and inspired others.
It's true. They all had a vision they were working towards, a bigger why behind everything they did.
Exactly. And it's not just about achieving things on a global scale. Purpose can be just as powerful in our own personal lives, too.
So even if we're not trying to change the world, having that clear sense of purpose can help us live more meaningful and fulfilling lives.
Exactly. It can give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and a sense of direction as you navigate all the challenges life throws your way.
It's like your North Star.
I like that. And Alan really emphasizes that cultivating a strong purpose isn't about suppressing your desires or turning into some kind of robot. He recognizes that real happiness comes from aligning your actions with your deepest values, with what truly matters to you.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where passion and purpose intersect, where you're doing work that you love and that makes a positive contribution to the world.
Beautifully put. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the joy of accomplishment.
Ah, yes. There's nothing quite like that feeling of satisfaction you get when you finish something challenging, whether it's a big project, learning a new skill, or even just overcoming a personal obstacle.
It's such a great feeling, like a reward for all that hard work.
It is. And Alan believed that this sense of accomplishment, it's not just reserved for those big, huge achievements. It's available to us in every moment,
I love that.
in every task, no matter how small.
So it's not about waiting for some big life-changing moment to feel happy and fulfilled. You can experience that joy in the everyday moments, right?
Exactly. In the simple act of doing your best, of making progress toward your goals.
This is where Alan's philosophy really shines. He reminds us that true happiness, it's not something you find outside yourself, not in possessions or fleeting pleasures.
It's something you cultivate from within.
Yes. Through self-mastery, through pursuing your purpose, and through that joy of accomplishment.
It's so well said. I feel like this has been such a great overview of Alan's work so far, but we've only scratched the surface, haven't we?
We have. There's so much more to uncover in his writing.
Well, I guess we'll just have to save that for another deep dive.
Definitely. But for now, I'd encourage all our listeners to think about what we've talked about today. What really resonated with you?
Yeah. What insights can you apply to your own life? It's pretty amazing how relevant James Allen's work still is. Even today, we're talking about a book written over 100 years ago, yet his insights on self-mastery and the power of thought, I don't know, they just feel incredibly timely.
I agree. I think it speaks to the enduring nature of these truths, these fundamental truths about being human. No matter how much the world changes, the principles of self-mastery, they stay the same.
And one of the things that really stood out to me was Allen's belief, his unwavering belief in our ability to shape our own destinies. I mean, he doesn't sugarcoat things. He acknowledges that life is full of challenges and setbacks.
Oh, absolutely. He's realistic about that.
But he also refuses to let us off the hook.
Right.
He's constantly reminding us that we're not just passive victims,
Yeah.
We're active participants in creating our own
Yeah,
realities.
that's powerful.
It is empowering. It's so easy to slip into that mindset of, oh, I'm powerless to change things,
Ugh.
especially when you're going through a rough patch.
Totally.
But Alan's work, it's like this reminder that we always have a choice.
Always a choice.
We can choose to dwell on our problems and let them define us, or we can choose to rise above them and create something better.
Create something better, yeah.
And that choice, Alan argues, is ultimately what determines our destiny.
I love that. It puts the power back in our hands. But he doesn't just leave us hanging with this idea, does he?
No, not at all. He provides a roadmap, a way to actually do it. He gives us real tools and strategies for cultivating willpower, for harnessing our concentration, for aligning our actions with our deepest values and aspirations.
And I think that's what makes his work so enduring, so valuable. It's not just a bunch of theories, it's a practical guide, a guide for living a more fulfilling, more purposeful life.
Totally. One of my favorite takeaways from Alan's work, and it's a simple one, is his emphasis on thoroughness.
Thoroughness, huh?
Yeah. It seems so basic, but it's actually really profound when you think about it.
I see what you mean. It's easy to brush thoroughness aside as, like, boring or tedious.
Right.
But Alan, he saw it differently. He saw it as this sign of character, like a commitment to excellence in everything you do,
Right.
no matter how small.
It's like saying, I'm going to put my best effort into everything, even the little things.
Exactly. And he believed that was essential for building a strong character, a character that could withstand the storms of life.
It's about building that inner resilience, that strength.
Absolutely. And I think that's a powerful lesson for all of us. To approach life with intention, with integrity, to strive for excellence always and never just settle for good enough.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into James Allen's The Mastery of Destiny, what are your final thoughts for our listeners out there?
Well, I would say Alan's message is timeless
Right.
and so relevant right now. It's a reminder that we have the power within ourselves to create lives filled with meaning, with purpose, with joy, regardless of our circumstances.
Yes.
It's a call to action to take responsibility for our thoughts, to cultivate that inner strength, and to align our actions with what truly matters to us.
It's about becoming the best versions of ourselves.
It is, and it's an invitation to embark on this lifelong journey of self-mastery, knowing that the rewards are immeasurable.
Beautifully said. And I just want to add one final thought. Don't let this deep dive just be a passive thing.
Right. Don't just listen.
Take what you've learned
Mhm.
and put it into practice. Start small, be consistent, and don't be afraid to try things out, to experiment a little. You might be surprised at what you can achieve when you commit to mastering your own destiny. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into James Allen's The Mastery of Destiny. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did.